Hey guys, welcome to Local Relief Live. I am your host, Heather Hacken, and our whole goal is to educate you on what's going on in disasters. If you have been impacted by weather, more than likely, you know the guy that we are about to talk to. So, Mike Boylan, you may know him from Mike's Weather Page. He has been kind enough to join us today, and he's going to talk about quite a few things. So, first, want to say thank you and welcome, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love to talk. It's a weird habit that I have talking daily. My daughter always says, Daddy, you talk a lot. It's up. I love these kind of podcasts. I appreciate you inviting me, and hopefully we spread some information for folks. The season's getting close, as we know, right?
Yeah. It seems far away, but it will be here in the blink of an eye. And then once it's here, it's here. And like last year was here with a vengeance. So we shall see. But first of all, like, everybody loves you. Like, you're the real weather guy. And I think, from that standpoint, and I don't mean like real, like you're the authentic, but I think people know you as that real guy, and that just happens to do weather. But how in the world did you get into this?
Yeah, I never dreamed, this would 21 years later, I'd be sitting here, doing weather 24/7. I went to school at University of South Florida for marketing. I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do in my life. And I remember I was going to school for engineering, and that's because what everybody my age was told to do, I guess. And then, math was not my thing. And then the Super Bowl came around one year, and we had the Budweiser Frogs. And I fell in love with marketing. I don't know what it was. And all of a sudden, I was like, that's me. So I was going to college, and in 2004, we had all the hurricanes coming to Florida, and was taking an HTML website class. And I was like, oh, man, I'll build a little website, and basically I backdoored it on a site that I had already. It wasn't even Spaghetti Models or Mike's Weather Page. It was like you had a secret way to get to it. And I intended to only share it to friends and family originally as a place, one-stop place to go, because I got tired of looking for graphics. And I ran across Spaghetti Models one day I'll never forget. And then the next day I was looking for them, and I couldn't find them, and I'm like, eh. So Charlie was coming, and that's when I decided to build this little website and throw all these graphics on there. And then, through the years, it's just compounded. And then social media came around. I think in 08, 09, I joined Facebook. And then it just took off. The whole world's kind of migrated to social media, and it's definitely accelerated, since going to social. So half of my Twitter page is the website. The other half seems to be the social media side. And, I'm not a real meteorologist. I claim, I make sure I let that be known. And I'm just a weather hobbyist like most of us. And every day I guess I learn something new and, roll with it.
So you went from loving Budweiser Frogs and then weather. Did you just always like weather, or what was it about the?
Well, I don't know. I think it's grown on me. And, my dad is still around. He's 87, and finding out the more I talked to him in the last year or two about weather, he's a huge weather guy. And my granddad was a big weather guy. So I think it must be in my genes. I think living in Florida, the fascination as a kid with thunderstorms rolling in every day. And then, of course, hurricane season. I mean, I love Weather Channel. I love Jim Canforia. I would go to sleep with that cone, and I would wake up the next morning wondering where the cone was, and we all get tingly inside. It's a weird Floridian thing. Tropics are a way of life. And I think it just kind of just became my addiction. I grew up around NASCAR. I'm a big race fan. And I think that obsession of that is carried over to weather.
Yeah. No, I absolutely think it's fantastic. And, as far as creating that platform and creating that one-stop shop. And if you haven't followed Mike's Weather Page, he cranks out information constantly. So especially and I can attest too, I found Mike's Weather Page, not, from events and seeing him speak, but from being a local and being in Sarasota and saying, hey, where can I find my weather? I mean, yes, you have your weather on the 8s, weather on the 9s, whatever it may be. But what about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the rest of the time where you really want the updates? And not only that, but, when you are in an area prone to disasters and weather happens so fast, you want those constant updates. So that's really how I found, and Mike's weather page was just from the fact that there are so many updates, and it is refreshing and it is nice, because it is that constant stream. And with Mike, he's never claimed to be like an actual meteorologist, but dude knows his weather. So it's clearly good genes, and you're in the right area, from that standpoint.
Yeah, I always say, we all have access anymore to the models. We all have access to websites like Tropical Tidbits. Levi is a good friend of mine, and he's put together an awesome website. So we all have the same models. And I think it's just how you message anymore. And, I always tell people, you end up kind of getting attracted to someone's style, and it might not be me, it might be another meteorologist on TV, but I think people gravitate to the messaging and the way that they like it, and it just, I try to be constant without the hype. I've molded my messaging more over the years based on the recent storms we've had. I've learned how traumatic storms can be and living through these disasters. So I have changed, with my crowd basically, and you're always evolving, with what people want, when they want it, how much is too much. Adjectives are very, can be very bad in a way sometimes, because some people don't like certain news channels because they use a lot of adjectives. And so, yeah, it's always a constant struggle. It is what I'm going to post, what I'm going to post it, how I'm going to post it, and not sound excited, not, still have compassion. Yeah. So it's just, like I said, 21 years. I think every year I'm changing a little here and there and just kind of going with the flow and what people want.
What has surprised you about what people want? I know I see you, you talked before about race cars. I happen to know, I believe you have your own beer. So with going with the times and going, kind of with the social media wave, what has surprised you there? Like, what's your big holy crap moment?
Yeah, lately it's been the younger generation. I don't know what it is. Kids under 10, sometimes college kids, TikTok, let's say, that's become my second largest platform. The younger generation coming up to me, excited about the weather, watching my weather and meeting FHP, Florida Highway Patrol, that say things like, yeah, I watch you on TikTok or I watch you on Instagram. So I think for me, it's the amount of people that are tuned into social anymore and the ways that they find me, and I hear it a lot. Like, this is the only way that people get their weather. Maybe not for me, but just the world's changed. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think the most magical moment of my 21 years, and especially storm chasing, was this past winter when FSU had the snow. I went up there and everybody knew I was chasing snow, but I had kids knocking on my window, college kids, like, hey, Mike, when's the snow coming? And I was like, whoa. I had meteorology students that were across this 4 guys that, once get his PhD in tropical formation, and they watched and follow and got selfies. So I think it's the love of weather. That's just, what I've learned. I think my style, like you mentioned, the beer, the NASCAR, football, baseball. I mean, everybody's kind of the same. And then we all love weather. It's, I think that's been the most shocking, is just that love of weather and how many people are actually tuned into weather, I guess. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, speaking of last year, I know you mentioned last year was crazy. But what was your takeaway and what was your summary from just 2024 as a whole? What did you take away from last year?
For me, was the impacts outside of the cone, the impacts outside of that center line that we all watch. Debbie started for me. Well, Beryl was an amazing Category 1 Texas hurricane that just, I've never seen nothing like it, never felt nothing like it. Beryl, knocked out Houston power for 2 weeks, a month, went all the way to New York. So seeing a storm bring 200 plus tornado warnings all the way up through New York and Maine, Debbie through Florida, flooded Live Oak and Lake City. We had an inland flooding with Debbie. Like, that was an impact outside of landfall. And then here comes Helene, a storm that was 100 miles plus off of the Florida West Coast, and basically just the surge devastated tens of thousands of homes. Our city, county still recovering. And then Milton, the tornadoes. So, the tornadoes in Florida and the inland flooding with Milton and the rivers. So to me, last year's takeaway was landfalls are bad, but the inland effects sometimes are even worse. And I saw that with impacts outside the cone. That was huge, you know. And then, of course, Helene, all the way to the Carolinas. I mean, Helene didn't stop at the Big Bend. Obviously, it was a bigger impact in the mountains.
Now, did you do anything up in the mountains? Did you actually go and see any of that damage up there?
No, I went to Keaton Beach, seeing that Big Bend area and Steinhatchee, and the day after the storm surged for me was just like, I was in a house that had 19 foot of storm surge. We measured the water line down to the ground, and it was 19 feet. And seeing a development with 225 homes, and 200 were gone. Like stilts were just standing there, and everybody's belongings are just washed away in the ocean, you know. So I stuck around Florida because I had to get back home because we had massive damage here from Helene that we still had. 6 months later, we still got crazy damage. So no, I didn't get to go to the mountains. Obviously, it was bad. I mean, I did take a trip up there to Gatlinburg, sure, winter, and I was on the Tennessee side, and I saw a lot of creeks and rivers with damage, and I could only imagine the Asheville area, you know, how bad it was. And they didn't get a lot of rain. I mean, they got a lot of rain, but it's just the flash flooding, you know, 7-8 inches doesn't sound like a lot, but in the mountains, it all, you know, you just draw a V, and all that water just goes to those lower valleys, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
So that was huge impact, you know, that nobody really was focused on originally. Landfall. So if anything, it taught us, you know, landfall bad, yes, but man, we got to really educate folks that outside of that landfall are going to have impacts. And we saw that with Ian. Ian was the first storm that I saw. People in Arcadia and stuff were like, holy crap, like we didn't know this was coming. All these rivers, Peace River, and, you know, our flooding in Port Orange, Daytona, people waking up to 3 foot of water in their home, seawalls destroyed on the other coastline. It was a really wake-up call. Like, this thing doesn't just stop at the coast.
Yeah.
Those are just impacts we're learning more and more about.
So what is your advice for, and I apologize, I got a dog here that's asking for attention.
Yeah, I'm surprised my two haven't been up here yet.
Yeah. So, but what is, you know, you bring advice about the cone. So what is your advice for people looking at the storm? Because people are so involved typically with the line, you know, in Sarasota here, okay, if we're not in the line or if we're not in that infamous cone, you know, we're fine. But what is your advice for people, you know, when they do watch? What should they pay attention for?
Well, you know, spaghetti models are huge. Like, I've learned so much about looking at spaghetti models, looking at all possibilities, looking at outliers. Just realize 2 to 3 days out of every storm, it seems like the storm never goes down that center line. There's always a shift one direction or the other. So being in that cone, on the edge of the cone, Fort Myers is right on the edge of that cone, the whole life cycle. But everybody was trained to look down that center. And then the folks at Fort Myers, Naples and Key West, they weren't in that cone. And it was like, oh my God, they were telling me, you know, surge. So even 2-3 years ago, people were still focused on that center line. And so I guess my advice is that cone is just where the eye could go, and just really understand that history shows that that storm is probably going to go to the left or to the right of where it is 2 to 3 days before landfall, and pay attention to those outliers, you know, and really that every storm is different. That is the biggest takeaway. You know, hit the reset button. Ian is not Charlie. Not all storms are going to turn south of Tampa. You just have to hit that reset button every storm and realize you're going to have your own set of impacts. It could be inland flooding. It could be tornadoes. It could be, you know, Tropical Storm Debbie back in 2012 was one of the biggest storms that hit Tampa Bay. And it was a tropical storm way off the coast. And it just sat there, dumped 20 inches of rain and closed our bridges. So, you know, go focus on the category strength and definitely look outside that cone and realize that this thing can turn. And always think about Ian. That cone never had Fort Myers in the center of that cone. It was always on that edge, and they got hit, you know, head on. So,
yeah. So what, you know, speaking of storms upcoming and that type of thing too, what do you have any indication of what you think, you know, this year may be, or what are your thoughts here?
Well, you know, we're in this weird cycle. It seemed like 92, we had Andrew, and then we had this big long break till like 04, and then we had 05 kind of busy, obviously. Not kind of busy. 05 was busy, Katrina and others. But then we had another break, and it seemed like we really didn't get going again until like 17, right, with Harvey and Irma. And then since then, every year, we've had something big happen. And I contribute a lot of that to just the water temps. You know, we use something called an anomaly map And it gets controversial because you always say average, but it's based on a 30-year average. I mean, I don't know what it was 500 years ago. I tell people, I don't care what it was 1,000 years ago.
Right.
Our water temperatures run is warmer than it was, you know. So we look at that, and water temperatures are already sneaking back up above normal. We're in this La Nina neutral phase, which is crazy, but, you know, a part of the Pacific controls the Atlantic. And when that water in the Pacific is cooler than normal, we have this La Nina effect, which gives us less wind shear, which also builds a stronger Bermuda high, which in turn shoves more storms west. And I've really done a lot of homework on this. In years that we have an El Nino, which we're not in, we have a lot of fish storms. And then a year like last year, a year like 2020, we have a strong Bermuda high and we just have more push west. So, you know, trying to predict an exact location is impossible, but we just know that this pattern we're in this year is similar to last year, and the water temps are there. So that's really all we got to go by. You know, water temps are warm, and we're in this La Nina neutral pattern. It'll be active. You know, and another thing, I guess I need to make more points about this when I do presentations, but number one question I get is like, how many storms will you get? How busy is the season going to be? And, you know, last year was supposed to be 25, 30 storms. It was supposed to run out of letters, you know, and I actually was 18 storms, less than 23. So 23, we had 20 storms, more than last year. Everybody thought 23 was a bust. You know, it's like, what a bust season. Well, technically, we still had 20 storms, but we really only had idea.
Yeah.
So I tell people, man, it does not, you know, we got to stop focusing on the amount of storms because last year was,
Right.
but we only had 8 storms.
Yeah.
So it's not the number of storms, it's just whether or not they impact you or not.
Yeah. Yeah, agree. And even there, you know, I think the difference, you know, with Florida this past year is, you know, usually, I don't want to say you kind of share them, you know, but you have Texas, you have Louisiana, you know, I mean, we kind of share the storms with areas in the Gulf, and, you know, and Texas got hit by Beryl. And then after that, it was like Florida.
So, I mean, you could look at history and say, all right, well, the Carolinas have been kind of in a dry spell. The East Coast of Florida's been in a dry spell, and Louisiana was big in 2020, you know, and then they had Ida. So I think, you know, Mother Nature's weird about evening things out and moving things around. And it's all really about the Bermuda High. And if that thing slides a little to the northeast, and it might curve more to the East Coast of Florida. But these are things that there's no long range modeling. So what I pretty much have learned in the last few years is we watch that loop current, the loop eddies in the Gulf. The Gulf's warm. And that's really it. I mean, you know, we've seen rapid intensification over the years really be a thing. One of the most amazing stats I've ever seen is when talking about continental U.S., there's been 10 major hurricanes that were 150 miles an hour or greater winds. So out of 10 hurricanes that hit the continental U.S., 9 of those were only tropical storms 2 or 3 days away. So 9 of those 10, within 2 days, they massively blew up into Cat 5, Cat 4, 150 mile an hour winds. So that rapid intensification is something that we've seen more and more.
Yeah.
And that's just where we're at. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't see it stopping overnight. It's just this pattern we're in, you know?
Yeah. I saw the one that still freaks me out was Otis. That was a couple of years ago. And it was nothing. And it was a 5. It didn't hit as a 5.
It hit Acapulco, and not one model predicted it. That's what's scary. That's really scary. So you just have to be ready, you know? And I mean, every storm is just different. You know, we have all this modeling and tools to us, and you just have to be ready. I mean, Milton came across the Pacific, believe it or not. You know, I don't think folks realize Milton was a Pacific trouble wave, basically, and it crossed the Mexico, was in the Gulf, and it pretty much, that was the seed. Every storm has a seed, I call it, and Milton came from the Pacific. It was challenging. You know, I think as much science as we have available, Mother Nature always throws a loop. And I think Milton, for me, was one of the big loopholes, was the flooding inland that we saw, especially around me, just the amount of apartment complexes needing water rescues. I was talking to Fish and Wildlife, you know, the amount of rescues they did during Milton, you know, 150 plus in this one apartment complex, you know, right by my house. The water just had nowhere to go. Again, everybody's focused on the winds and the landfall, and it's like, oh crap, you know, I live 30 miles inland and I'm getting flooded, you know. That's real. That's real life. I think that's just here to stay. I don't know if the drainages are having a hard time keeping up. We're building crazy, and the ground gets saturated, and that water cannot keep up in the drainages. I mean, you can see it. The water eventually goes down, but it takes a long time anymore. And those are real things. I mean, Fort Lauderdale a couple of years ago, they had 23, 24 inches in a 24-hour time span, and it flooded your airport. I remember. We just have to be ready. These things are happening, and we just have to be ready.
So what can we expect from you this year? I know we hear rumors of the storm chasing, and you did a little bit last year. What are you up to this year?
I love it. I don't know. I invested a lot of money and time into a mobile network set up for my truck. I can do my reporting now remotely, which when I started storm chasing, I started in 2020, and I kind of got wrapped up into like the storm chase mode and forgot to report. People were like, "Oh, you just stopped." So now I make sure when I do go storm chasing, I still like update people every 15, 30 minutes. You know, that's my thing. Now I can do it on the road, but being in the storm is crazy for me. I mean, I don't know what it is. There's an adrenaline rush. I find out there's a lot of the followers of the page in these areas that I go to, a lot of local officials. So I always feel connected when I go to these places anymore. And it broadens my, messaging, my knowledge, experience. It definitely helps me message better, seeing things firsthand that you can't explain sitting where I'm at right now. Talking about storm surge is one thing, but seeing these real life images, and talking to people changes things. So yeah, it's definitely been a good change for me to get into that part of storm chase mode, but still be able to broadcast from the truck. But it is like home.
No, I just like a big monster truck. Did you invest in the truck itself as well?
Oh my God. Yeah. So the first storm chase I went to, buddy of mine went, we rented a Jeep, and I came home and I'm like, oh, I got to get a Jeep. So I had a shirt made with a Jeep, and I had this truck already. I had a Silverado 18 that was already lifted and roll bars. And I'm like, my God, I already got a storm chaser. I was meant to be. So I've turned it into my storm chaser. Way to get a family car though, because Julie and the girl, first of all, they don't know where to sit now. And two, they hate it.
Oh, I didn't
Craft there, right? Yeah. Lots and cameras and
yeah. Little detail. Yeah, you don't take them with you to storm chase though.
No. 50% of the time I'm by myself. The other times, but I scared both my good friends. Both of them wanted to go home, so they, Ian was enough for Phil. Ian was in the most longest eye wall I've ever been in. The winds were relentless. It just seemed like it never was going to end, and it was getting to him. And then Beryl this year for Texas, my buddy Joe, he just couldn't believe the power of an only Cat 1. The surge, the damages, what we saw. But he just like, man, I'll never experience something like that. Being in a Cat 1. I'm not that guy that over exaggerate. I mean, I'm really good friends with Reed Timmer, and those guys really get adrenaline. And I guess I've always been a monotone, low key guy. Yeah. So that's my style. So if I ever get amped up, it's real. It's fun. I don't get amped up very often.
I simultaneously hope I see you a lot this year, and then I hope I don't see you at all this year.
Yeah.
Depending on, what's going to happen. But either way, I think what you do is just absolutely remarkable, and from someone that is a Florida local and does appreciate, the update and that real perspective too, and you have always the family spin. So I do like that.
Appreciate it. I've never dreamed it would come to this, honestly. I mean, it's really crazy. I mean, I've done a lot of Great American teach-ins, and I guess it's a cool message for me to get out to the younger generation, having passion about something. Like I said, it just happened. It fell in my lap. I roll with it, but anything you're passionate about eventually, hopefully is successful in whatever anybody sets out to do, but it's been tough. I mean, you gotta, social media is tricky. It's not always, great with comments and saying the wrong thing you didn't mean to say, or, it's scrutiny. Had a good run.
You're not done running yet.
Yeah, I have a guy that writes songs for me, and he has this one line. He says, we all know Mike likes to play, but sometimes Miss Julie takes his phone away. As long as don't post at night, don't let the trolls get to you, because there's a lot of that out there. And it gets the best of them. I see all these top dog meteorologists get affected sometimes. It develops thick skin, but the amount of people I meet, has been overwhelming. 99% of folks don't even comment on the pages, and that's what I've learned. So most of my true followers just watch.
And just follow.
Yeah, hopefully, and I met a lot of cool people along.
Yeah.
And as you know, we're both friends with Kevin Guthrie in the state of Florida. And, you know, I think what you do, I know you're doing more than just Florida, and I do more than just Florida, but we both kind of started out with just Florida. And there's a lot of people live here, you know, but that being our home and having the state's support is huge for me and you. And I feel like we both provided good service for.
Yeah, he's amazing. I can't say enough, good things about Director Guthrie. So I do appreciate that. Yeah, as a local and, just as a person in general, I appreciate you. I know a lot of other people do as well. Obviously, as far as Mike's weather page go, oh my gosh, you can reach him so many different ways. You can reach him through his website. That's not Spin Models. That's Mike's weather page, right?
Yeah, both Spaghetti Models and Mike's weather page.
Okay, Spaghetti Models. Yep.
It took me 10 years to learn how to spell spaghetti. That's so.
I think it's Spin. I'm like, that's not right.
Yeah,
I knew
no.
it was something else. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just easy. Thank goodness for Google. Google now will fix your letters,
Yeah.
But TikTok, Instagram, YouTube now. YouTube's the struggle, but it's slowly growing. And I'm starting to get a really good little niche over there because I do a morning show. It's usually an hour long and people like to watch it on their YouTube. And so it's, of course, Facebook started it all. And that's been my biggest platform to date. So
Yeah.
still love that.
Well, definitely. As far as time goes, is one going to receive information faster, or are they all about the same?
Yeah, I post exactly at the same time. The problem with social media, and that's for any of the pages anybody follows, is you don't know what they're going to put into your feed. And that's the problem. Like, you might see something from 2 days ago, 3 days ago. You might not even see it. I don't click on somebody's page. I just rely on what they put on my, your feed.
Yeah.
That's tough in hurricane season because you might not see the most recent post. And every meteorologist that I follow fights that. You throw it out there and you hope people find it. I always recommend that folks click the name of whoever they're following, and then you'll see the most recent feed.
Yeah.
But I did the same thing. I get caught up in this, and whatever they decide to put in your feed, unfortunately, that's what you see.
Yeah.
I do keep a webpage. I do have a section on the webpage that's got all my posts on there on the right side. So there are ways, I try to keep people up to date with stuff. And then, the notifications when you go live, X is really good about that. I don't, YouTube, as long as you subscribe, you get notified, and of course, Facebook. So, but it's tough. It's tough to get out. I got 2 million followers and not too many people will follow one given time, So
Yeah.
I don't know where everybody gets those other 1.5 million sometimes. Like, why didn't they see it? But that's just Facebook. That's just how they do it,
Yeah. Yeah. We're kind of at the mercy for that one. So, but we even have you on, in the local relief app under weather. We have Mike's weather page. And then, like I said, definitely follow, especially during storm surge or storm season. Yeah. Storm surge too. Hopefully none.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I love your site. You showed it to me. I really love it. I've told a bunch of folks about it.
Thank you.
We'll hype it up for you this season. And yeah, the goal of what you provide is questions I have about what I'm doing here too. Like a lot of times you have questions. What is storm surge? Show what storm surge. The people that use your site have questions like, where do I go? The storm didn't hit me. And I'd be the same, but what do you do now? Like, where do you go?
Now what?
You even know where to go. Yeah, now what, right? So there's that tools that are out there, even local state government, sometimes people still have questions. We got hit hard and people were coming to me like, where do I go for this? Where do I go for that? I'm like, I really don't even know. It's not my expertise. How do I apply for FEMA? What does the FEMA rule mean? What about state help? And I'm like, I don't know. So, I'll send them your way. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Download the local relief app for the now what? Like that infamous, question people have. So yeah, now what? I really appreciate you and all you do. Again, follow him, like him, share him, whatever you need to do. Make sure you are up to date. And again, Mike, I'm sure we will have you soon. I have you on again. And when weather permits, we will see how that goes. And I can't thank you enough. So thank you.